Thanks for downloading the RealAg Radio podcast. If you enjoyed this program, 1, tell your friends, and 2, we got another show that you'll be interested in. It's called RealAg on the Weekends. It goes out every Saturday. It's broadcast across Saskatchewan on RealAg Radio on 650 CKOM and 980 CGME, as well as we podcast it as well. It's really a look at the week that was in Canadian agriculture. Make sure you check it out. It's called RealAg on the Weekend. Enjoy today's episode of RealAg Radio.
This episode of RealAg Radio is brought to you by high-performing new carbine insecticide from FMC. Carbine insecticide delivers fast, selective, and extended control of aphids in alfalfa and pulses, leaving beneficials like lady beetles to help in the fight. Ask your retailer today.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Friday edition of the show. It is so great to be back here in the host chair here today on this Friday. Big thanks to Lyndsey Smith for filling in and doing a great job. Great shows this week. Yeah, lots happened while I was gone. It was great to be able to take a few days off, rest and relax. Went down to one of my favorite cities, really to visit. I just love it. Nashville, Tennessee. We had a great time, of course, on Broadway. I haven't been there for probably 6 years. The amount of expansion and construction is just staggering to me. It is amazing. Been going there since like 2010. Been there a lot. Well, and Rural Radio Studio is actually in Nashville, so RFD TV is based out of there. Wasn't able to visit this time because it was a bit of a vacay with some other friends, and it was a lot of fun. If you can't have fun in Nashville, you can't have fun anywhere, as the saying goes, that I try to repeat to people all the time. So, yeah, fun time, and appreciate Lyndsey really, really doing a great job with this week's show. So if you missed any of them, please go down to wherever you get your podcasts and download this week's show, the RealAg Radio podcast. Would really appreciate that. Hey, thanks so much for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a part of your workday. And we got a RealAg Issues panel for you here today. We got some big issues. We got some breaking news. We also got an update on the federal workers' strike, which is still ongoing. It sounds like the federal government has put forward another offer here today. But when will this end, and how is agriculture being impacted? Lyndsey Smith had a chance to talk to Marie-Claude Bebeau, our Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food. We'll talk about that conversation, as well as that and a whole lot more. We've also got coming up here right away a beef market update with Anne Wasko as well. Yes, cash markets, there's some strength there. Hey, if you have any feedback on today's show, we'd love to hear from you. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find us across all the different social media channels, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, as well as TikTok, or you can call that RealAg listener line. Now, the number is 855-776-6147. You dial that number, press the number 3, and you leave me a message. Let's take a break. When we come back, we're talking cattle markets with Anne Wasko, the Gateway Livestock Exchange, right after this.
Looking to launch a successful career in agri-sales or take yours to the next level? Lakeland College's Agri-Sales and Customer Relations Certificate takes you beyond the classroom to learn from the experts. This apprenticeship-style program will teach you everything you need to know to thrive in a sales career. The real world doesn't wait. Register for Agri-Sales and Customer Relations today at lakelandcollege.ca.
Peter Johnson at Wheat Pete, RealAgriculture.com, and what an opportunity! Oh my gosh!
You think you can't grow better wheat? You are absolutely wrong. We're going to show you how to strive for those record wheat yields that they get in the UK and in New Zealand. You can grow 150 bushel wheat. I'll show you how.
Catch Wheat Pete's Word every Wednesday on RealAgriculture.com or download the podcast on iTunes or Spotify.
How's your seed quality? What should you treat with? What about herbicide carryover and environmental concerns? Spring is here, and you've got a lot of things to think about in regards to your pulse crop. The Pulse School on Real Agriculture has information and advice for all these questions and more to help you navigate this season. Brought to you by BASF. Pulse School episodes are available at pulseschool.com, realagriculture.com, or as a podcast on your favorite streaming service. Download the latest episode today.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. Before we get to the RealAg Issues Panel, we're going to talk beef markets. This segment's brought to you by MNP, your trusted business partner and leading ag business advisory firm in Canada, proudly serving clients from coast to coast. Take your operations business planning to the next level and visit them today at mnp.ca. Joining us right now for the beef market update, as always, is Anne Wasko, the Gateway Livestock Exchange. Anne, great to chat with you.
Yeah, good afternoon, Shaun.
Okay, let's get into it. Give us a bit of an update here, what's going on in the pricing side of the equation in the cattle markets.
Well, we've talked about some really explosive pricing, both sides of the border for some time. U.S. market this week looking like it's just taken a little bit of a breather, and maybe that points to last week as the spring high. But in the South this week, 171 to 172, kind of steady to 2 lower. In the North, 178 to 180 on the live side, 285, 286 delivered. So that kind of ranges from steady to 3 lower. So a little bit of a breather south of the border. The cutout did not take a breather. It hit 311 on the choice cutout last night. That's up $4 from last week. It's a new kind of all-time high, kind of flirting with, this is kind of in 2020 when the market exploded after packers were closed down after COVID issues, and so we're getting we're getting close to that point in time, but still last night was the record price for this time of year. And just to put it in perspective versus this same week last year, so we were 311 last night on the choice. A year ago we were 255. So just tells you just how explosive this wholesale market's been. And I know this is a tad old news, but just for a reminder, those that maybe hadn't heard, U.S. on-feed report for April 1 was out the end of last week, and total on-feed numbers down 4%. I know the report this week, focused a little bit on the placement number, which was only down 1%. Guesstimates were expecting a bigger decline, but I think the bottom line is, the storyline is still smaller supplies. And if that was a fact of, more later calves moving on feed earlier, of course, we'll get that impact in placements, further down in the spring here as we go. So. And just to circle around on our local market in Western Canada, our fat cattle held really solid again this week. I think you'd call the dressed market steady to even $1 higher, so 380 to 381 delivered. That's going to put our live average in around 228 live, I think, when Canfax is all said and done tonight. And just to show you that leverage piece that we talked about from a negative perspective so much last year, this year, now you've got cattle feeders. Okay, we sold some cattle at 380, 381. Now we want 385, Mr. Packer. So the asks here as we close out the week are stronger as cattle feeders feel like they've got some pretty good bargaining power in their feed yard.
Yeah, are packers defending, with cutout up, are they defending some of those margins by backing off some of the kill for the week, or are they still killing pretty strong?
I would say, especially from a North American perspective, kill is very, very solid. And of course, remember, this is that time of year where demand and demand for grilling products is very strong. We are, especially south of the border, going to see more cattle, kind of come forward as we get into in May and June. And so kills will pick up. But the packer he's doing just fine. Thank you very much. And so he's willing to certainly keep processing cattle even at these higher costs because he's turning around and selling it for a higher wholesale price.
Yeah, and with that Canadian market a $1 higher, we're seeing a bit of a trimming of that basis. How do we interpret that?
I'm impressed that you're learning, Shaun.
Well, it's you know what, and we've been doing this for a long time. At some point, I have to pick up on things.
Oh, no, that's great. Great point. Yeah, you're right. Basis, and that was, again, such a negative Nelly that we talked about so much last year. We're trimming it up kind of that 10 to 12 under right now. So slowly improving from that 20 to 25 under we started the first quarter at. We've still got some room to go though. I mean, the 5-year average for April is closer to kind of a 6 under, and by May a 4 under, and by June and July closer to par. So that's a strong argument for, even if the U.S. market, starts to lose some ground as it heads into June and July, that the local Alberta market could hold together much better just because we have basis in our favor historically.
Now, I know a couple weeks ago we chatted about I asked you about grass cattle prices, and I can't remember what word you used to describe them, but boy, I'll tell you what, some of the numbers I've been hearing, they are lofty, they are strong.
Lofty, that's a good word. I think it might even be, we might need even a more aggressive word than that. So, I mean, demand has been strong for grass cattle, all through the start of 2023. And as we get closer to green grass, it gets even more explosive. And so, just to look at that 5 to 6 weight steer price where we're sitting today versus where we were a year ago, I have trouble even getting my head around these words, but it's more than $100 a hundredweight higher. Whew. So let me put some numbers to that, because I struggled with it. So the 550 weight average in Alberta presently around $340 a hundred, or $340 a pound, right? A year ago, $230. So that's the difference that 360 days has put into this grass cattle market in Western Canada. Put it down to dollars per head. We're talking about pretty close to $600 per head more on these light grass cattle versus a year ago.
Wow. So yeah, okay. So to attach a comment to that, is it a shortage of supply situation, or is it demand for the performance of those cattle coming off grass, or is it just that the feed yard's being super aggressive and is optimistic about the future?
Well, I think all of the above, but it really, goes back to the supply piece and the demand piece. So from when you're looking at pricing out into, if we're going to talk about light cattle today, we're looking at an outcome into 2024. We'll pull up your live cattle futures markets for the spring of 2024. And, April live cattle, US dollars, we've seen 180 or, close to it. So the market is pricing that in for next year. So higher expected prices on the other side due to the smaller supply of the North American cattle herd, calf crop to be specific. And then the other piece that's coming into it is, of course, the big margin that has been such an impactor over the last year and a half in terms of cost of gain. Well, again, these are expectations, but look at new crop corn prices versus where we're at. December 23 corn today, 5.25 a bushel, and spot 6.25. So, that's the expectation in terms of the cost side. So when a cattle feeder's sitting down and doing his break even and his, ability from a purchase price side, those are the kind of numbers that he's using. And why the market's at 180 next year, or the potential is there for 180, is because demand has also been super strong. Export demand is solid. You're looking at less beef that needs to be sold in North America. And so less beef, again, is going to mean the per capita supplies will be smaller. All those things support the demand piece as well.
I would assume as you're talking to cattle feeders out there, a lot more talk about the drop in corn prices than talk about the dollar right now. Is that because the dollar's hovering around that 74 cents, but not necessarily ripping back and forth between 70 and 80. It's been somewhat kind of stable at these levels.
Yeah, I think a good word would be range bound. We've had some moments there, but clearly from an impact basis in terms of that bottom line margin is going to be that cost of gain. And so if these feeder cattle are going to continue to trade strong as we go through the rest of this year, then we're certainly going to need to see some repercussions and in terms of getting that crop in the ground and getting the production levels that are being anticipated and forecast today, so that we can get start to talk about corn prices by new crop or Western Canadian feed prices in a much more realistic range to support those kind of feeder cattle prices.
Yeah, great stuff. Well, never a dull moment in the cattle markets. That is for sure. We got that part figured out. Absolutely. Hey, Anne, thanks so much for joining us here today.
Okay, have a good one.
That is Anne Wasko with the Gateway Livestock Exchange with the beef market update we do every 2 weeks here on Real Agriculture and RealAg Radio. When we come back, we'll get to the RealAg Issues Panel. Kelvin Heppner, Lyndsey Smith standing by to discuss the big issues of the week.
ABJ Agri-Products is North America's exclusive distributor for air bubble jets and easy jets. These sprayer nozzles reduce the number of driftable droplets and at the same time maintain a uniform droplet size, primarily between 300 and 400 micron, ensuring more even dispersion of your chemical products, providing reduced drift and increased plant coverage. Let us help improve your spraying operation by visiting abjagra.com. That's abjagri.com.
As you head out into the field this season, the Corn School's got you covered. Everything from tillage discussions, weed control info, field trial results, yield strategies, and more. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF. Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from RealAgriculture.com, or as a podcast from your favorite streaming service. Download the latest episode today.
Want to get the best out of your soybean crops? Whether you've been growing them for a generation or are just starting into soybeans, find what you need to know at soybeanschool.com. You'll see videos on growing tips, pest control, and much more from specialists across the region, all in one place. Easy for you to access from your desktop, tablet, or mobile phone. Maximize your yields by staying up to date with the Soybean School, presented by BASF, Pride Seeds, and Syngenta Canada.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. This segment's brought to you by Granubor from US Borax. Ask for it by name. Go to borax.com. Let's get to the RealAg Issues Panel. Looking forward to this. Well, it was this week's RealAg Radio show host. It is Lyndsey Smith coming out of Ottawa, Ontario. Lyndsey, how are you doing?
Woot woot. I'm doing super well. I had so much fun. Thank you for going on vacay.
I should have just had you host today. Why just make it 5 days in a row?
No, I woke up this morning and was like, looking forward to the show, but not having to run the show was a bit of it was nice.
Yeah, so and a great lineup of stuff too. I'm
so happy with everyone who said yes to me. I don't know how you do this week in, week out, because there was a couple times where I was like, oh, maybe I should do this, I should do that. And everyone said yes. Like, it was amazing. But the stress of if they had said no, I don't know if I could do that every week.
What's my rule? There's always a guest somewhere.
There's always a guest somewhere. You are correct. Even if it's 5 minutes before you go live, there's always a guest somewhere.
Yeah. Or there's a monologue to pull out of your back pocket. There's always something to chat about.
There's always, yeah.
No. Well, you did a great job. I listened to the great stuff with Phil Flynn and John Dreger from earlier this week. Talk about the markets. That was great. So, great job as usual for sure. Okay. Also joining us is Kelvin Heppner. Are you calling us from a tractor? Are you out there seeding, Kelvin?
Not quite. We're still 2, maybe 3 weeks away, I'd say, given the amount of snow and water that's still in the field. But I'm going to second what you said, Shaun. Great job, Lyndsey, on hosting the show this week.
Well, thank you. And I have to say, on the Farmer Rapid Fire, for anyone who listened yesterday, there was the Canadian Shield was in full effect. Anyone that I talked to in the West still had snow on the north slopes in the tree lines. And then here in Ontario, we're pretty much rolling. So strikes again.
We are jealous.
Mm-hmm. It's beautiful. I can't complain.
What's your read on the level of optimism out there? How do people sing? Because we've seen, we heard from John Dreger earlier this week. From a market perspective, things are soft. We had a really rough Wednesday, Thursday in the markets this week. Today's a little bit of a mixed trade from last time I checked. But what'd you get from the farmers from an optimism standpoint?
So sort of mixed as well. What's interesting is we have had sort of similar and then dissimilar weather, but we had that warm up and then sort of a return to cold in the west with snow and the whole bit. Here we returned in Ontario to cool, but not cold. So we're still we didn't really get stopped in our tracks. Like maybe the west is still waiting for, that warm up finally and things to dry out like Kelvin is. So interesting though, certainly talking to those farmers in Saskatchewan, Alberta that were looking for moisture, they seem much more optimistic at this time of year than say they were this time last year. So, on the condition side, maybe I would say probably many areas have improved, at least on the moisture front. But we're still looking at perhaps a pretty delayed seeding season for many areas. And that will, I think, start to weigh on people for sure.
Yeah, in our March intake of the Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index, we saw farmers across the country, being much more pessimistic on the direction of the markets going forward. They predicted quite correctly, because since then we have definitely traded to the downside, Kelvin. I think the question here, though, is when we think ahead to fall prices and even potentially into that 24 crop, and we haven't even planted the 23, but I'm thinking out into the distance here. It sure feels like we're getting closer to where we see that crossing of the intersection of commodity prices versus input prices, and potentially a negative situation for farmers at some point here in the next 12 months.
Yeah, there are going to be some farms in tough timing situations here, especially with what we've seen happen in the fertilizer market, for example, where we didn't want to risk having prices increase on us over winter. So we bought fertilizer last fall or over the winter. And since then it's come down in price, but so have crop prices. And so I think there are going to be some farms with expensive fertilizer and lower value crop prices, that kind of confluence of things happening here with the 23 crop.
Yeah, and I just looked at the bar chart here. We got some more green on the screen from last time I checked. So we're trying to, get some of that market back here today to the upside. Hey, Kelvin, give us an update. We saw earlier this week a press release come out. Now, this is in response to the CP Kansas City Southern merger that's happened. We got a bit of an alliance, CN providing a little bit of a counterpoint, and I guess increased access to Mexico.
Yeah, they're working together with Union Pacific and another rail line, creating what they're calling, what was the name for it? Falcon Premium Service. These three railways are working together to provide what they say is going to be best in class intermodal service. So definitely a response and a challenge to the merger that we saw take effect a couple weeks ago between CP and KCS. Kansas City Southern. That network is going to be the only railway that spans Canada and goes all the way down into Mexico. And so now this combination, these three railways, they're not merging, they're not amalgamating or anything like that, but they are working together on what they're calling Falcon Premium Intermodal Service, Mexico, US, and Canada, a rail connection all through Chicago.
Lyndsey, you and I were chatting yesterday on the phone, and we were talking about the fact this federal strike is still going on. I'm surprised. How about you?
Very, actually. And what's sort of interesting is it feels like there was perhaps in the beginning quite a bit of optimism that this would be short-lived. It seemed to be going in that direction, although maybe a few days longer than many thought. And now it seems we're going backwards. So the latest that I've heard, at least today, was sort of the two sides have sort of dug in, and there isn't actually a lot of negotiating happening, specifically on the price side. Now, I've spoken with a few people who are part of these unions. There definitely seems to be a bit of a disconnect between some of the regions as far as how concerned they are about certain things. And I definitely think that there's, and we saw today, an escalation of the picket lines. And I would say that there's probably people who are part of these unions that really want this to wrap up as well and really don't want public sentiment to go against them. So I don't know. I'm quite surprised it has gone on this long. I think we're day 9 now.
Yeah.
So is it 10 today?
I think so.
Yeah, it could be. I know I've kind of lost track, but yeah, I think most people said like 5 to 7 days. So we are, well past that now. So we'll see what happens over the weekend. But I'm sort of surprised it has sort of soured.
Well, speaking of the weekend, RealAg on the weekend on Saturday, our news show, we're going to play your interview with the Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food, Marie-Claude Bebeau, and you ask her about this federal strike. Give us a bit of a sneak peek here, Lyndsey. From the minister's perspective, what was she saying about the need for this strike to come to some sort of conclusion? Was she that forthright about it?
So interestingly, not. She seems to feel like contingency plans that are in place are okay and didn't seem incredibly bothered by it. So, I did ask her about grain movement, and we do know that the Canadian Grain Commission is using its contingency plan, and grain is continuing to move. She didn't say that any export partners were concerned at this point. And I did ask about temporary foreign workers, because that is also one of the things that some of our listeners have alerted us to if they're concerned about delays potentially in processing the paperwork to get temporary foreign workers in, say, for the fall season. Bebeau says that is considered essential and that will continue. So I didn't actually get the sense that there was a ton of urgency on the minister's part anyway. It seemed like she seemed happy with the contingency plans that were in place. I did ask about the research centers, and she reiterated that, of course, any with livestock on them, that is also deemed essential. All the livestock will be cared for, but didn't seem to mention anything about concern over trials not going in. It sounds like they will not, and didn't seem super concerned about that. Personally, I am. Our research stations do some really great work. And as much as perhaps plants are not livestock and therefore, don't need to be fed and watered daily, the trials and losing all those site years, if they don't go in a timely manner, it would be incredibly detrimental. So while I understand on the grand scheme of things, maybe it doesn't seem like that big of a deal, it actually really is.
Yeah, I was off earlier this week on a bit of a short little vacay, and the group I was traveling with, one of the couples does have a company that works in agriculture, but the other two outside of the industry. And I'll tell you, across the board, we no support whatsoever for the workers in this strike, right or wrongly. It was interesting. It's kind of doing some very, very informal polling. It's going to be interesting to see as the longer this goes on, where that, Megan talked about this last week with public sentiment. I just don't detect a lot of tolerance for a long strike here, especially if people like trying to get passports or impact. Like, that's the kind of stuff, like, I think there's more serious things. You can't get a passport, but that's the kind of an issue that affects a lot of Canadians. Like, whether the plots get planted or not at the research station, that impacts our industry. But when you've got like passport, think back to during the pandemic, how angry people were about the fact they couldn't get a passport. And that was kind of a ridiculous situation. So, Kelvin, what do you think happens here with public sentiment?
Public sentiment, I agree, is probably going to turn. And I heard a commentator this week, Matt Gurney, actually explain, we deal with if municipal government employees go on strike, you notice it right away because your garbage doesn't get picked up if you live in the city or in town. If provincial employees go on strike, you notice it in that week kind of thing. And if federal employees go on strike, you might not notice it right away, but a month or two later, and the longer this strike goes, the more noticeable it'll be, and the more backlogs it will create that will ripple back, whether we're talking income tax processing. For example, our local RCMP station, the staff are on strike, or the admin staff are on strike. So you can't get a criminal record check done, or it has to be done by somebody else. So if you need a criminal record check done for volunteering for baseball season coming up here, that is harder than it would be otherwise. So there's all kinds of things like that where it's adding up. And I do also wonder not only about public sentiment, but about sentiment among the people on the picket line. Lyndsey mentioned some of the divisions, regional divisions, potentially urban, rural kind of divide. Some of this is being driven by cost of living increases in some of the major urban centers across Canada, Toronto, Vancouver, and union members wanting their wages and other benefits to keep up with that. Whereas in rural Canada, we don't have nearly the same amount of pressure on that front. And so I wonder whether there's some, I would say not only public sentiment matters, but also the sentiment among the union members themselves, and what kind of pressure there is internally in the union and support there is, whether that support is waning internally to maintain these picket lines, or people wanting to get back to work. It does sound like so far some of the the federal payroll system may not actually have stopped sending out paychecks to some of these people. So the impact on the pocketbook may not have hit yet either, but that's also looming as that might only take 2 weeks kind of thing to take effect. So I do wonder about union member sentiment as well. And also further along the lines of Bibeau's lack of maybe expressing concern about some of these things. What about layoffs down the road as managers and decision makers in federal departments realize, hang on, this job, I can cover this while I'm doing this, while I'm being a manager, kind of like some of those types of feelings. Union members are going to be feeling that pressure too, concerns on that side of things as well.
No plot research to do. Don't need technicians. Like you have one kick at the cat here. It's not like you can plant those in August. So that's a 1 year thing, but maybe some of these roles, government's under pressure to cut spending, and so if the longer these people are on strike, the more it might become evident which roles are necessary and which ones might be easier to drop. Yeah, for sure. Hey, let's take a quick break. We got more coming up here on the RealAg Issues Panel here on Rural Radio 147 Sirius XM.
If farmers know one thing to be true, it's this. There are a lot of factors you can't control. The weather, breakdowns, and a million other variables standing between you and a successful season. But for all the uncertainty, you wouldn't change a thing, because that's farming. And that's why Koch Agronomic Services wants to make life on the farm a bit more predictable. From nutrient management and protection to seed enhancement, get the confidence of being in control. Visit kochagsolutions.com.
Whether you're seeding, harvesting, or anything in between, the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com has you covered. Timely agronomic information from industry experts available online anytime. Give your wheat crop a good start and a great finish with the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com. Brought to you by C&M Seeds, Syngenta Canada, and the Alberta Wheat and Barley Commission.
So many issues to talk about here this week. This segment is brought to you by the 2023 Beef Improvement Federation Research Symposium and Convention, and it's coming to Calgary, Alberta this July. Find out more by going to beefimprovement.org/symposium. Looking forward to that one right around the Calgary Stampede. Yeehaw, here we come to Calgary. Going to Cowtown. RealAg Issues Panel, Shaun Haney, Lyndsey Smith, Kelvin Heppner. Now, we referenced the interview with John Dreger from Left Field Commodity Research earlier in the show here. And one of the issues about the StatsCan report that, I don't know, I'm kind of scratching my head here, and John brought this up, is the fact the intake, the questions to the farmer on what they were intending to seed was done in December. And now, of course, we're almost into May. I don't know. A lot has changed since then. I'm not saying the numbers aren't accurate. They're not worth discussing. They may actually prove to be totally correct. But are we being as accurate as we could, Kelvin, based on the fact we're doing an intake in December for something we're going to release in April? This just seems backwards to me.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people have the same thought process seeing the report come out this week, and with that major explanation at the bottom, a major asterisk attached to a lot of these numbers because of the timing, the lag between the survey and the decline that we've seen in most crop prices. We've also seen crop insurance pricing and coverage information published in the meantime, which might influence some rotational or some crop input or cropping decisions for this spring. There's, and this is all part of StatsCan's effort to try to reduce the survey burden on farmers, and I think that's something that everybody agrees is useful, is a useful exercise. But I don't know if we want this kind of trade-off in terms of the information quality and the data being released only 4 months later. And these are some questions that we have sent to StatsCan, and we're awaiting a reply from the agency. Why did they move to this in terms of obviously they want to reduce the survey burden, but why wait until the traditional April release date if the survey was conducted 2, 3, 4 months earlier? Why not publish it in late January when it would have still been timely? And the more typical turnaround time for StatsCan. Also, maybe they did in their modeling account for some of these variables that have changed between the survey time and the release this week, but we also don't know that because it wasn't clearly outlined or explained in the report either. And we also don't know if they're going to continue doing this in future years or whether this was just an experiment this year. So a lot of question marks surrounding the StatsCan intentions report this week.
The burden on farmers is kind of a weird way to put it, isn't it, Lyndsey? Or what do you think?
Well, no, I think realistically, if you ask people who get called by StatsCan, they don't like it. People like to complain about the timing of the surveys. They complain about when they're done and that they're too busy and it interrupts what they're doing and all that. So I do, from that perspective, feel like they're sort of damned if they do and damned if they don't, in that no one really loves answering these surveys. Some people I know really hate them, but I guess my point is, okay, so they've moved the timing to try and make people perhaps a bit more amenable to answering, which I think is probably smart. But then why wait? Why not just back up this particular report, back it up, release the numbers as they are when they are, and then we can talk about them at that point and then factor in all the other things. So, you're right. We may see that the planting intentions don't change a lot by the time we actually get crop in the ground, or those sorts of things. But at the same time, I don't understand why, if you move it up as far as answering the question, why would you not just release it sooner? I don't know why they'd wait.
Like we said, we're waiting for a response from StatsCan on that decision on the release of the report and the timing of it, and we'll definitely be discussing it when we hear back from them. Could also be on strike, so we'll have to wait.
There is that.
There is that, yeah. Interesting, and I think we hit on this a couple weeks ago. Ford is making the decision to not include AM radio in some of its future vehicle models. Of course, a lot of vehicles don't have CD-ROMs. A lot of vehicles don't have 8-tracks anymore. Maybe some of you are still ripping around in vehicles with 8-tracks. But, technology changes. But, rural Canada, rural U.S., this is a little bit different, I think, because AM radio is really a way for people to access information. And we're seeing some campaigns happening, particularly, this really hasn't hit rural Canada yet, I don't think, more so from some groups in the U.S., basically lobbying and pushing Kelvin for AM radio to remain.
Yeah, the National Alliance of State Broadcaster Associations is among the groups that are raising this as an issue and lobbying to have AM radios still maintained in vehicles. So Ford's not alone. Volkswagen, Mazda, BMW, Volvo, Tesla, I think they've all talked about or outlined plans to remove AM radios from their vehicles in the future in the next couple of years. And so, yeah, this is something that not only are we losing the ability to get information or the regular news and weather forecasts, farm reports, music, all those types of things, talk radio. It's also the emergency communication side of things where this radio is used to let people know about tornadoes or blizzards and things like that, road conditions. And it's a fairly cheap form of communication that you don't need a subscription for. You don't need an expensive technological device that needs that relies on cell towers being up and running and those or satellites and those types of things. So that's where, to me, an AM radio signal travels so far compared to some other things, other ways of communication too, that to me it'd be a mistake to move in this direction. So I'm admittedly biased on this. I've worked in radio for years, and so I appreciate the value of it in many ways. So yeah, and probably our whole panel would be in that case. But it's still, yeah, I'm scratching my head about how much saving is there really for a
well, exactly to what end?
This radio,
what to what end? What money are we actually saving? It seems silly. Lyndsey, I'm that person that I've had a lot of rental cars here in the first 4 months of the year. I'm that guy that gets the rental car and immediately goes through the stations and to listen to some of the local radio.
So I do too, which is sort of interesting. I didn't know that about you, but but then as you were talking about this, I was like, I don't know, I didn't notice that the CD player left the vehicles. Like, I don't think it
it did.
Right? Like, it didn't register. Like, I'm thinking about it now. I'm like, when did that happen? Like, both of my vehicles now obviously don't have it, but I don't remember when that sort of happened. So isn't it funny that, getting rid of the CD player, that makes sense because we moved to digital music, but this is something different, right? This is exactly that. How much of a cost saving could this really be? And this is an information sharing platform, not so much a music platform. It sort of boggles my mind a little bit. And although I will admit, in our household, probably we only listen to one AM station, and it's 1200, and it's sports. So there you go. It's talk radio. But I also, when I get into a rental car, the first thing I do is check the presets and dial in the local radio stations. Yeah. Ottawa has terrible radio stations, by the way. I miss the ones out west.
Well, a lot of areas, I think, do. But to me, it's a rural-urban issue as well.
It is. Yeah.
You live in an area with a good data service. You get into your new vehicle, and the Bluetooth automatically connects, and it starts streaming your Spotify playlist and or your favorite podcast because it's auto-downloaded. Whereas if you live in an area without good cell service, you don't have that option. And it's something that I think it just takes the framing of an urban-rural issue in some ways, where the decision makers are again not understanding the rural implications.
Well, it's what's next? Hey, we're here on Rural Radio 147. Satellite radio. It could easily be the next decision is we're taking satellite radio out of the vehicle.
And some of this is probably being driven by wanting to drive people to the subscription model. That's where the world is going. Everybody wants to have people sign up for subscriptions to their services.
Nickel and dime to death, I tell you. But I remember one time talking to an ad agency in Toronto, and I remember the advertising person saying, why would somebody ever pay for something like satellite radio? There's tons of stuff on free radio. And it was yeah. If you live in Toronto, you hit seek, you stop about every 4 numbers.
Yeah.
In East End, Saskatchewan, that AM dial rolls for quite a while before she stops. So I agree with Kelvin. This is very much a urban-rural sort of issue for sure.
And satellite radio has immense value too, but it's not local often. So
yes,
it is the AM.
Good point.
The AM value is on the severe weather situation type. Those types of scenarios, to me, there's still immense value.
Yeah. Well, we got to take a break. Speaking of value, we got to pay some bills. We'll be right back on RealAg Radio right after this.
Infuse some energy into your next corporate event, customer meeting, or conference with RealAg Radio, Canada's national agriculture radio show. Create a unique experience at your next event with host Shaun Haney, broadcasting RealAg Radio live on SiriusXM, featuring exciting guests, captivating interviews, and the latest news from the agriculture community. Contact advertising at realagriculture.com or call 587-787-1795 to book your on location with RealAg Radio today.
Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this Friday edition of the show. And we are breaking down the biggest issues of the week. Shaun Haney, Lyndsey Smith, and Kelvin Heppner, all of Real Agriculture. This segment is sponsored by Koch Agronomic Services, makers of Synthos Nutrient Enhancer, designed to make crops stronger by combating phosphorus deficiency. Learn more about Synthos and other nutrient management, nutrient protection, and seed enhancement solutions at kochagronomicservices.ca. That's Koch, K-O-C-H, Agronomic Services. .ca. Okay, Lyndsey, something that's been going on, honestly, it feels like forever, is this seed regulatory modernization consult. And we got a story posted at realagriculture.com. This is what some have described as sort of a once-in-a-career opportunity where they're basically opening up the book on seed regulatory, the text. And man, I presented at a working group that was it felt like 2 years ago, and this is still going on. Where are we at in this process?
Well, that's a great question, because I don't know if I have the exact answer for you, because you're correct. This has been going on, this entire process has been going on for quite some time. And the timeline to wrap it all up, honestly, just this portion, this consultation that's open until Monday, May 1st, this is considered a pre-consultation, which I'm not sure what all the other stuff was before. But there's a timeline that goes out to 2024 for some of what people are being asked to comment on. But this is opening up the Seeds Act and seeds regulations. So this is going to cover, there are questions in there about variety registration and sort of the breadth of anyone essentially who's going to buy seed and grow seed and ship seed, and have certified seed inspected. All of those things are open for sort of discussion. So you head over to the CFIA. It does close Monday for this portion of it. I will note, because they make this very, very clear, this isn't about seed potatoes, however. Seed potatoes are going to be handled in a separate consultation. So there you go. And there is a bit of a timeline out to 2024, but I'm not sure. It doesn't appear that that's sort of the deadline where these changes would all be rolled out, but maybe it is. It's not really clear. But honestly, there also isn't a really neat and tidy landing page. There is a lot of information online, but we did link in the RealAgriculture.com story. We do link directly to where you can take the survey and make your thoughts known. So I encourage you to do so. It does close May 1, and this will impact the entire seed industry. So buying of seeds, selling, all of those things. So anyone who's at all interested, please have your say by May 1.
Yeah, a big part of the discussion here has to do with wheat.
Yes.
Like as per usual, wheat's different, or at least some say so. And, should we have a a variety registration system in Canada for wheat that is more in line with, say, canola, or moving to more of a corn model, which is, lacks a lot of, it has guardrails, but it's nowhere near as restrictive as we are with wheat. And is it time to modernize that? Some feel the answer is clearly yes, and some feel very strongly no, we can't do that. And it's all of the usual suspects with many of all of the usual points of view, and which is one of the reasons why this issue feels like stuck in, I don't know if it's quicksand, it's definitely concrete. This has been going on for quite some time. So check that story out at RealAgriculture.com. Kelvin, Real Agriculture, I would say we broke the story. First to post this story, big changes with the executive ranks at Alberta Wheat and Barley Commissions. What's going on?
Yeah, there's still some details to fill into this story, and I think they will come out in the coming weeks. But a major change, something we don't see very often in terms of the senior leadership team at the Alberta Wheat Commission and the Alberta Barley Commission. These two organizations have had shared management for a number of years, and they're currently in the process of merging as of August 1st. At least the plan earlier this winter was to merge by August 1st of this summer. And we learned about some major changes that happened this week last night. And the story went up earlier today that longtime general manager Tom Steve and Chief Operating Officer Syed Karam are no longer with the commission as of Wednesday of this week. And there's still a lot of details to be filled into this story. But longtime leadership, Tom Steve has had a senior role in Canada's grain sector, especially representing producer groups and the voice of producers for a long time. And Alberta Wheat and Alberta Barley moving on as of this week, something that we don't often see in the context of farm groups where board of directors takes this amount of action at one time.
The release or the statement we got from Alberta Wheat and Barley Commission, it almost reads like, say, like you probably see this familiar, Kelvin. It's sort of like when the Leafs get bounced at the playoffs. It reads like we're changing things. Like we do not see like a wide sweeping change like this typically. We see executive directors leave and come and go, and those things happen. But this seems quite dramatic. So it's definitely something we're going to be following very, very closely as the days progress here. Lyndsey, something I know that you are scratching your head about. You're actually more passionate about this than I thought you would be, to be honest with you.
Oh, goodness. Can't wait to hear what this is about. Yes?
Joe Biden.
Oh, yeah.
And his, presidential campaign.
not surprising.
Why are you so passionate about this?
Well, because, I'm not American. I'm not going to vote. It kind of doesn't matter. But I'm sort of surprised that he's announced that he's running again. And I'm not trying to be ageist, but I sort of feel like, goodness, man, don't you want to just chill out and, spend your last days visiting with friends and sort of what, I know that life expectancy has really come a long way in the last while, but if he runs again and is elected, he will be 86 at the end of his next term.
Yeah.
That's pretty old. And to me, that just, I'm sure he's a nice man. I don't wish him any ill. I want to make that very clear. But if you're going to be leading, one of the top world powers, that to me creates a lot of uncertainty when you have a very aged leader, and that could create a lot of volatility. And I just wonder if it's the best choice for their party.
And you just identified one of the biggest things we're going to hear from whoever wins the Republican primary.
Whoever does.
This is exactly what we're going to hear. A vote for Biden is essentially a vote for Harris.
Right.
That's what we're going to hear. A lot of.
And not even just that, but just the volatility of the uncertainty of having a very elderly leader. It just, oh my goodness.
Well,
anyway.
Yeah. And then the other part, I had somebody say to me this week that, but Trump's not that much younger, but
no, well, I know.
He seems a lot younger.
Well, but I have the same, I'll be honest. I basically have a similar concern for Trump as well, because he may seem a lot more vital and younger. I don't see him as terribly healthy. So there's that too. So I don't know. And I guess is that really the question? Ultimately, it's put to the people. Vote for who you want to be president and you decide. So there you go.
Kelvin, we're going to talk about this interesting word I'm not sure I've heard before. Friendshoring. What is this?
This came up on the show a couple of weeks ago, and you guys said the same thing.
Yeah.
Friendshoring is the term that Janet Yellen, U.S. Secretary or Treasury Secretary, has been using over the last year, maybe a little bit longer than that, talking about bringing back manufacturing capacity and trade with countries that are friendly. And a lot of this is in the context of the U.S.-China relationship. And so Finance Minister, Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland has been talking about this in speeches over the last year as well, friendshoring and working closer together with allied countries that share the same values and those types of things. So this week, there was a major summit in Toronto. The Public Policy Forum Summit took place at the Metro Toronto Convention Centre, and a bunch of big thinkers from across Canada and other parts of the world met. And Steve Verhoeven, who we had on the Ag Policy Connection a couple episodes ago, longtime chief trade negotiator for Canada, was one of the speakers at this summit this week. And he raised some questions about friendshoring, about what happens if all of a sudden it's friends off with an important ally, that type of thing. He just basically highlighted the same risks exist when it comes to country relationships between countries. And some of this is also in the context of not having a functional dispute settlement body at the World Trade Organization and no international referee when it comes to trade. If it's all just about friendships and there's no referee, what happens again when you're not inside the friend circle? What kind of recourse is there? You're not in, but different countries aren't going to be invited to Canada's birthday party. What's our recourse going to be down the road? So,
well, that is an important one.
But basically, he kind of threw some cold water on this idea of friendshoring.
Interesting. Okay, well, you know what? We're out of time. We're not even going to get a chance to talk about how Kelvin he's sweating bullets, I think, about the Leafs. See, listen to that, Lyndsey. That's a nervous laugh.
It's the natural state of affairs, though, when it comes to being a Leafs fan.
I gotta say, I watched the game right to the end last night, Kelvin, and more than a little happy with the outcome, and knew you'd be in tears. So I didn't text when it was over.
Thank you. Not everybody was kind.
How about those Blue Jays, though? We are looking good. And I said we. I know. Yes, it is we.
The royal we. Yeah. Anyway, we'll see what the weekend brings for hockey.
Yeah. Well, Mariners are in town. Return of Teoscar Hernandez to Rogers Center. That'll be good.
See, Kelvin, he's already moved on. He's fully moved on.
Long ago.
Yeah.
Okay, Lyndsey, have yourself a great weekend.
You too.
Kelvin, good luck to you, buddy. We're thinking of you.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
If you have any feedback on today's show, make sure you email me, shaney@realagriculture.com. Or you can always call the RealAg feedback line. The number is 855-776-6147. Have yourselves a great weekend, everybody. Thank you so much for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio, and we'll chat again on Monday. Talk to you then.
Thank you for downloading this episode of RealAg Radio, brought to you by high-performing new carbine insecticide from FMC. New carbine insecticide hits aphids hard with effective, selective, and extended control. It also has activity on lygus and tarnished plant bugs. Ask your retailer today.